Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Ollinger, and today I am introducing Andra Davidson, who is a certified divorce coach, and she is the developer, I guess, so to speak, of the Better Than Divorce program, which is trademarked. So, Andra, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you help people?
Yes, hi. Like you mentioned, I'm a certified divorce coach. I also am a trained mediator, and I have a psych background for what it's worth. But my focus really is on helping people get through the emotional stress, overwhelm, anxiety related to the divorce process. We all know that divorce can be a really excruciating process. I hope your listeners won't mind, but I call the divorce as a shit sandwich. And that, my goal is to help make it a little bit more digestible as we go through the process. There are things that you have to get through, but it also doesn't have to be horrible at every step. There are steps that we can take and actions we can take to minimize conflict and improve the outcome.
Yeah. And what do you think that people, when they are going through a divorce after, if they've got kids, it's probably a slightly lengthy marriage. What do you think people kind of lose sight of? Like, what are they missing?
Oh, that's such a good question. The hardest part, I think, for people as they go through this process is remembering that it is going to be okay on the other end. Every day can feel like a year, and that, there are going to be benefits that come out on the other side, a willingness to be open to possibility, to imagine what your future might look like post divorce, and be willing to let that in as you start this process, which can feel so depleting and overwhelming and sap all your confidence as you go through it. But that's partly why, I get involved, why I recommend people have a support system so that they can set themselves up to get through it as successfully as possible. Because when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to remember to do that sometimes.
Yes, and especially for parents, but we're talking to the moms when they
Right.
really need to manage themselves, but they're also still being a mom at the same time. And so it's kind
Yeah.
of like balancing. So how do you help moms do that?
Yeah, I think this is truly the reason that I started doing this, because I do think most moms want to reduce the impact of divorce on their kids. And
Mhm.
there are really important ways to be able to do that. I think it's so valuable for your listeners to know that it isn't divorce itself that causes damage to kids. It's the conflict that kids are exposed to throughout the process that causes the damage. So
Mhm.
remembering that can be a really great first start to think about, how am I going to rebuild this relationship from what it was? You're not married anymore. You're changing that. I like to picture it almost as a bridge. There's you on one bank, there's your ex or your spouse on the other bank, and the bridge that you previously had doesn't work anymore, right?
Mm.
You have to build a new one. What is that going to look like? What bricks, what materials, what choices are you going to make to build a sustainable bridge to get you to this new relationship with your ex so that you can be a healthy co-parent?
Mm.
That's a really important part of this process, is acknowledging that the relationship that you had is now done. That part is over, but you have to have a relationship going forward, and hopefully you will. Hopefully you can have a productive and healthy co-parenting relationship. And that looks different for all kinds of couples. So there's not just one way a healthy co-parenting relationship looks,
Mhm.
but figuring out what it does look like for you, what works for you in your family and your kids, and then taking the actionable steps to build that is a really, really important part of this process that you're not going to get from the lawyer. So that's something to think about as you go through divorce. Your lawyer is there and plays a really important role, and the legal dissolution of the marriage. That's an incredibly, obviously vital part of the process, but it's
Right.
not the only part. And if you don't build in some systems to deal with those other parts, then you're likely missing some real opportunities for growth and change and to creating a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Yeah. And something, what I hear just in, conversation, because this isn't my specialty, but what I've heard from, because I coach parents, is a lot of times there's usually one partner that is kind of grieving it a little bit deeper because they were the one that didn't want the marriage to end.
Yep. Yep.
And so I see these parents like kind of like holding on or grasping on. And the best thing I've ever heard was that, it's no longer like one family, it's now two separate families. And I think just
Yeah.
like visual is like, oh, well, you're now a family over here, you're a family over here. And then kind of, I love your visual with the bridge, is that you're building a new bridge. And how can you
Yep.
still parent these children, but not as one family, but two separate families, so to speak?
Yeah. I love thinking of it like that. That's right. And I call that phase that you sort of described where someone's hanging on as
Mm-hmm.
divorced but not separated. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like this emotional entanglement that they're unwilling or unable for whatever reason to let go of yet. And the acknowledgement that you're stuck there can be very, very powerful and important, because it's a hurdle to letting go and transitioning into the next phase of your life. If
Mm-hmm.
you're still treating your ex like you're one family, not two, as you described,
Mm-hmm.
then you are stuck, right? And it makes it very difficult to say, what is my future going to look like if all I'm doing is focusing on the past and what it used to be? So that phase of letting go, of transitioning, finding acceptance, what does acceptance of this new situation look like for you, and moving into it is so important. You're very correct that people grieve differently, right? People come to situations differently. So one party is likely not feeling the same about the dissolution of this marriage as the other person. That's probably the norm. So
Mm-hmm.
respecting that your spouse, your partner may be in a different place and may need time to adjust accordingly to get to where you are, and that process is going to look different maybe than what it does for you, can be a really eye-opening process for some who are going through it. Oh, that's right. I've had time to think about this. They haven't, or they've had time and I haven't. However that works, we're all just different. We all process information differently.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the idea of that kind of, the more, I guess I'm going to say, kind of like injured of the two
Yeah.
um, spouses? In my opinion, just observation and kind of personal experience, I've seen that that's the partner that wants to kind of blame the other parent, or like tell the kids, like, hey, we're getting divorced because they did this.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know you advise against that. So kind of, can you share a little bit your philosophy on that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that question. I think it's so important. So often parents say to me, but they need to know who their parent really is. They need to know. It's important that they understand. I fundamentally disagree. I actually think it is more your job to help them have a productive and healthy relationship with their other parent.
Mm.
The reason being, there are studies that show that kids see themselves in both of their parents. When you're
Mm-hmm.
criticizing the other parent, they feel like you're actually criticizing them as well. And
Mm.
that really stopped me in my tracks. I'm not going to say something negative about my ex-husband when my son or daughter thinks then that that's something negative about them.
Yeah.
Um, that is not a choice that I am willing to make. And as a parent, our job is to give them the love and support to know that they are safe, that the adults around them are going to be okay. They're going to get through this, even if they're sad, right? We're sad sometimes too as parents. We're sad, we're angry, we're frustrated, but we're going to be okay. And our job is to be the parent and say, it isn't your job to take care of me. I'm going to make it. My job is to take care of you. My job is to be there for you and let you know that regardless of whose home you're in or where you are at any one given moment, we both love you and are here for you. And we are here to protect you from that kind of negativity, actually. We're both going to be okay. And our job is just to give you the support, space to grow, tools you need to get through this time. That's your job as parents, as opposed to get your kids on one side or another. What that actually does is create stress and angst and anxiety in your kids. And I don't think that any of us truly want that. I know it can happen even sometimes in the best of intentions. So I'm not saying that parents have negative intentions. I actually don't think they do. I think most parents have the best of intentions almost all the time, but they just don't know better. Right. And sometimes we need to realize that we do need to do better. It is our job to step up and take the high road during this time, as hard as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that last word is just, it is hard sometimes. There are times when you really have to bite your tongue as hard as you possibly can and
Yeah.
breathe it out and use as much as you possibly can, because you do want to get there. And sometimes it's just like you get so triggered. It's like, oh my gosh, you feel like you're going to just
Oh,
have
yeah.
a meltdown or something.
And you might, and that's okay. People are going to have meltdowns. Come up with some healthy outlets, right? It's not that we're not going to need those outlets. So what does that look like for you? Is it exercise? Is it fresh air? Is it screaming into your pillow? Is it, a walk with a friend, someone you can vent to that's a really safe space? Those are necessary. I definitely don't underestimate the importance of having those coping mechanisms in our lives, but they're not appropriate for your kids to go through with you, regardless of their ages. So people will say, oh, but my kids are, in college. It doesn't matter. Your kids are still kids. You're still the adults, and let them figure out their other parent on their own. They don't need your help. They'll figure it out. They see more than we give them credit for. We all know that, right? So we know they're seeing and watching. They'll figure it out on their own. You don't have to do it for them. And when they do that, they'll be grateful to you for not having shared it. And I know that personally because that's happened in my life with my kids for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting what you brought up about the ages, because that's something I did want to bring about. I think that, a lot of this is very common sense too when you have kind of like elementary age kids
Right.
or young kids. But a lot of times I think that parents think once their kid is like a teenager, it's more like their friend, and they're more like, sharing way too much. And it's like, oh, this is my best friend. And they're not really treating them as the child that they still are.
Right. Right.
And I love that you even brought college age into that, because that's true, right? They're still your children. And no matter how old they are, they really don't want to be caught in the middle or used as a weapon or used as a sounding board or venting kind of person, because that's not their job. Their job is to be your kid. Yeah.
And if they're in college, I mean, most of us hopefully can remember being there at that time and that age. And they want to focus on their friends and their studies and living their life. And they don't want to feel guilty that you're not okay when they're not home, right? They don't want to feel like it's their responsibility to take care of you as the parent from far away. Even if they're, close in college, they're still hopefully focused on college and not on taking care of the grownups. And it really can be easy to get into that trap of, they're older, so it's okay to explain everything to them. And I really would just offer words of caution that, I love to ask a question as these decisions come up. What is my true intent? Is this based in love? So is my true intent for telling a kid about this background, this history, whatever the situation is, to cause harm to my ex, to get them on my side? Is it to really give them important information that they need? When you're honest with yourself about what your true intention is when you're sharing something, it can really help clarify whether or not it's a good idea, right? And is this decision based in love? I really love that too. for the child, for myself? Am I taking the high road for myself? Am I going to look back on this time and feel like I did the best I could during this time? Was that the choice that I'm going to be proud of? And if it isn't, why not? And what might you be able to do differently?
What if that intent is kind of muddled in the parent's mind, in that they think it's through love or for love, because I love my child, I want to tell him this.
Yeah.
And framing it in their head that it's like, oh, I'm teaching my child kind of like what not to do, or who not to marry, or what age married at. Like, oh, you should wait longer to get married. Like,
Right.
what if it's framed almost as this educational learning opportunity, but it's like somehow like really a jab at the other parent? Like, how do you help a parent like separate those two things?
Yeah, well, that's such a valuable question, because I think that's the message that some parents tell themselves, right, to justify sharing a message that they know in their heart is probably inappropriate or right on the line anyway, right? So again, I think if you go back to asking that question of what is my true intent, and you really listen to the answer, then you'd be pleasantly surprised that you know what the right answer is to that. I will also say that, one of the greatest challenges we have as parents in general, I think, and that certainly extends far beyond divorce, is letting kids figure some things out on their own, have their own experiences and learn from them, consequences and benefits and failures. And what does that look like? And what will they learn from that, all on their own? It's very hard as parents to let them have those experiences. I know it is for me. I think it is for most of, us moms, right? We want to keep our kids safe and happy and protect them and all those things. And it really goes against our instincts sometimes to let them experience some of this on their own. But it does apply in this situation too. The older they get, the more important it is that they establish and maintain healthy relationships with both parents on their own. It's not our job to have those relationships with the other parent for them. They have to figure that out. It can be hurtful sometimes. Do they forget a birthday? Do they not show up for something? That's not fun. But sometimes that's what has to happen for the relationship to evolve too. We can't necessarily protect them from every single challenge that will come up in a relationship with their other parent, as hard as that is. And it is really hard. And I don't say it lightly, but I do think that knowing that it's out there and how important it is a really important guide by which to choose our actions.
Yeah. And I think that's very kind of soothing to hear, that we almost have to detach a little bit from that protector role and kind of trust that our kids can learn and grow and figure these things out on their own, and that they are capable and resilient, and that they have, at least that, maybe not all the tools, but like enough information that they can like learn on their own and kind of piece that together. So I want to go back to the moms, because I feel like, just again, this is kind of going off of kind of experience, people I know, the moms are usually the ones that it feels like takes the confidence hit, because their role has been so tied up, or their identity has been so tied up in the marriage, as moms and as wives, that when the marriage does end, I mean, I'm sure men experience their own version of this, depending on what happened. But how do you support moms with kind of redeveloping their confidence and identity and their strength?
Yeah, that is so much of what I work on all the time. And the first thing I would tell moms is that you can't get around it, right? You have to go through it. So there's no way to skip the step of accepting this, and in a lot of cases grieving it, and thinking about what you're letting go of. What are you letting go of? The dream of a lifetime marriage, of your role as the hub of this family and what that looks like, of, is there embarrassment or shame in the societal pressure to stay married, and does it feel like a failure? And when you start to really be honest with yourself about some of those questions, what is it that is causing you that stress, then you can start to solve it. But you can't really dig into some of those. And if you're just reacting, or you're stuck in that victim mentality of, this happened to me and this was so terrible and I'm going to take it out on everybody. Look, we've all been there a little bit, and it's understandable, but it needs to be a phase, hopefully, right? That you don't want to stay in because it doesn't serve you, not because your ex deserves better, right? The strength that I help my clients build is not because their ex doesn't deserve, whatever is coming to them. It's because they don't want to live with it. Does their ex know that they're walking around angry and grumpy and frustrated and, unable to mobilize and do anything positive going forward? Probably not.
Right.
The only person who knows that is them, right? You're the only person who knows that you're causing your own life to be put on hold right now. So accepting that I have to look at this and figure out how I'm going to move through it. I can choose. I can choose to be a victim, or I can choose to say, maybe there's some opportunity for growth and transformation in here that I hadn't seen. Maybe something positive can come out of this that I hadn't thought of. Maybe this is actually a gift. I might not see that now.
Yeah.
Hope that I could look back on it and eventually see that this opened up a different set of options and possibilities for me. Maybe you can role model for your kids being in a new healthy relationship, first with yourself before you're with anybody else, right? Because if you don't go in and figure out what it is for yourself that you want to change, breaking those patterns are going to be really, really challenging.
Yes. Yeah.
So figuring that out first. There's one other idea and exercise that I love to do with parents to build their strengths. I guarantee all your amazing moms who are listening to this have been through other hard things in their life. Whether it is a job-related thing, a family relationship, an illness, an addiction, a loss. We've all been through really hard things. What did you use to get through that? When you go back to that hard situation that you overcame, what did you use? What attributes about you got you through it? Are you really strong? Are you determined? Are you a really good researcher? Are you creative? You willing to ask for help? What are those attributes that you brought to that situation, and how might you utilize them again now? Because divorce has this way of making us forget that we're strong and that we have these tools and confidence and strengths. But we do, they're just hidden or a little bit dormant at the moment. So thinking about what you have and what you already have inside you that you can reignite and bring to the table for this situation is a really wonderful way to re-engage some of your strengths so that you can get through this challenging time.
Yes, I love that. And kind of going back to what you said earlier about, the other, ex-partner doesn't know the feelings that you're carrying. And so I've heard this analogy of like, these people are carrying around suitcases of pain, and they just to let go of the suitcases because they're so heavy, and it's not helping or hurting. It's only hurting yourself. It's not hurting the other person. And so kind of letting those go, but then kind of like what you're saying, the next step is starting to rediscover yourself. Remember how you're a resilient person, what skills you've used in the past, what are your strengths, and how can you use those to pull yourself forward and pull yourself out into a new situation that could end up, like you're saying, being amazing. It could be,
right.
It could be the best thing that's ever happened to you. Sometimes people can't really see forest through the trees. Sometimes you can look back and be like, wow, that was, it wasn't a great time, but it was somehow a blessing that all this has happened, because now I blah, 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 all the things that happen after, and that there can be a happy story. You are a great example and a great role model. You've done this, you've lived it. You now have this amazing blended family. So any last tips, ideas, advice for the moms before we wind down?
The biggest thing I really just remember, I hope moms will remember as they navigate this challenging time is that an amazing, fulfilling future is out there for you, and you deserve it. That everybody deserves to live a life that they love, that's full of joy, that's something that they are embracing. And it does probably feel very far away today and unimaginable, but it is out there. And trust me, if I can, go through a 20-year marriage and be living the life I am today, I think anybody can. And I truly believe that. And it's why I do this work, because I know how hard this time is, but I also know that you can get through it and come out better on the other side.
And I can tell, like, I feel your authenticity. I can feel the genuineness. Like, you just have a very light feeling. When you talk to somebody,
yeah,
and they just feel really heavy. I can tell you've obviously done all the work. You're fully healed. You're living your, ideal life post-divorce and in a new happy blended family. And so I feel like just through osmosis, you probably are just giving this light and being an example and showing the moms that it is possible. You're living proof. And I think you're just a great resource and very valuable to so many moms and dads, who need someone like you, need somebody to help guide them through all the emotional changes, because it is, they say the most stressful, biggest thing that will happen in your life besides, a major death, but it is a loss. And that loss is very similar. So it's right up there with kind of the peak, difficult life experiences. So, okay. So how can people find you going forward?
So the best way is at my website, which is betterthanbeforedivorce.com. And I have a LinkedIn, Instagram, all the things, Facebook, there's a YouTube channel. So, but those are all available via my website. And there's a lot of free resources there that people are welcome to use. I have a digital course on the emotional tools that you need to get through divorce. If a one-on-one coaching relationship doesn't feel like the right fit, I still think everybody needs emotional support tools. So I created that, which is very affordable and accessible. And that was really why I did it like that. So I hope that listeners will just remember that they're stronger than they think. And I really am grateful for your reflection on how, this comes across. That's my hope, and I appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for the wonderful conversation. I'm sure that anybody who either, that's the thing with the divorce rate so high, we either are going through it ourselves or we have a friend or a relative that might need this guidance. So hopefully people will share this so that everybody can have the support they need. So Andra, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation, and you have a wonderful week.
You do the same. Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.